Many behaviors we associate with modern dating hide a series of erratic power vectors and psychological fluctuations just beneath the visibility of the interaction. We recognize these patterns by their popular labels: situationships, ghosting, breadcrumbing, and cushioning. A common sociological assumption is that these are cultural byproducts of digital convenience, the inevitable result of frictionless casual dating apps. However, recent research published in the Istanbul Gelisem University Journal of Social Sciences suggests a more rigorous clinical origin. By applying a psychotraumatology framework, researchers have linked these behaviors to the intersection of early trauma and dissociative defenses. This research identifies these phenomena as apparently normal dysfunctional relationships, a clinical state where the outward structure of a partnership facilitates severe emotional detachment. Examining the mechanics of this detachment requires a transition to the framework of dissoanalysis. This framework investigates how unneutralized childhood trauma generates subconscious dissociative loops, which are then optimized and repeated within digital environments. The clinical baseline for these behaviors often begins with chronic childhood trauma, such as neglect or inconsistent caregiving. This trauma fractures the psyche, triggering a protective dissociative defense barrier around the damaged core. This fracture leads to a disrupted formation of secure attachment schemas, creating a permanent baseline of relational instability. Within this framework, dissociation is the psyche's method for detaching from overwhelming emotional experiences. This defense secures the self by sacrificing the capacity for emotional intimacy, replacing connection with self-preservation. These internal mechanics dictate adult relationship dynamics through what Erdinch Osterk calls controlled human syndrome. The syndrome is characterized by a primitive sadomasochistic structure consisting of rigid abuser and victim roles. In these dynamics, individuals fuse through their traumatic selves, locking into a repetitive cycle of dominance and submission. The relationship functions as a subconscious reenactment of trauma, effectively masking a fragmented identity through interpersonal control. Digital platforms function as a severe force multiplier for these psychological fractures. When a traumatized attachment system passes through a digital boundary, it splits into multiple superficial avatars. This induces a state of cyber dissociation, a psychological detachment driven by the depersonalization inherent in digital communication. This environment allows for the development of cyber alter personalities. These curated personas serve as a buffer, distancing the digital interaction from the authentic, traumatized self. Operating through an alter personality minimizes emotional accountability and removes traditional moral constraints of face-to-face interaction. Dating apps leverage a libidinal economy, where users receive validation through matching, while successfully avoiding the vulnerability of genuine emotional engagement. This results in the homogenization of relationships, where individuals are viewed as placeable and disposable options. The digital algorithm provides the frictionless environment necessary for dissociative trauma to execute its programming. These behaviors can be mapped onto a diagnostic matrix by measuring the level of commitment against the degree of manipulation. The situationship occupies the low-commitment sector, providing a stable environment for emotional distance. This dynamic is a primary vehicle for avoidant attachment styles and vulnerable narcissism, where attention is secured without the risk of intimacy. Breadcrumbing and cushioning plot higher on the manipulation axis as strategies of intermittent reinforcement. Executing these patterns requires high levels of Machiavellianism and dark triad traits to maintain secondary emotional contingencies. These tactics weaponize the neuroceptive threat of abandonment, keeping the recipient in a state of constant emotional oscillation. At the edge of extreme manipulation is the objectification trap. This dynamic utilizes dissociative projective identification, where a dominant individual projects their internal conflicts directly onto their partner. This forces a state of dissociative attachment in the recessive partner, creating a submissive bond rooted in confusion and learned helplessness. This total replacement of authentic connection with material control defines the macro-social state of necrophysophilia, where material consumption and control entirely supplant emotional bonds. These behaviors meet the clinical criteria for psychopathologies, now functioning at a broad societal scale. Breaking these pathological loops requires a shift from observing symptoms to identifying the mechanics of interception. The nervous system integrates these fragmented parts when they are no longer viewed as flaws. Anxious parts and dissociative alters are in reality highly developed neuroceptive mechanisms designed for survival. This is why traditional communication advice fails to resolve these patterns. The root issue is physiological, not conversational. Recovery depends on resourcing a secure state within the nervous system, allowing for a physiological restructuring of the attachment response. Schema therapy provides a structured method for identifying and neutralizing the specific dysfunctions formed during early traumatic experiences. In more severe cases involving deep dissociation, practitioners utilize trauma-based alliance model therapy, or TBAM. TBAM addresses the dissociation directly, neutralizing the defense mechanisms and alter personalities mapped in the earlier model. The final objective is the restoration of a cohesive sense of self, which is the only state capable of establishing mutual, non-pathological connection. Correcting the current state of modern romance requires moving past the digital symptoms of cyber dissociation and addressing the psychotraumatology at its root.